Huda Fakhreddine, thank you for joining me on the Radical Futures podcast. Absolute honor to have you here. I'm going to just quickly say something about you, which is too short, too quick, but it's okay. People will get to know you as we chat. You are a writer, a translator, a scholar, a teacher, and also I think you're a poet in your own right. I don't know if you write your own poetry, but I've heard you read, and it seems like you do. You can tell us about that. And you are from Beirut, and I'm not sure, is that true? Or maybe you're from Lebanon?
Yeah, I'm from the south, actually.
Oh, you are? Okay, gosh. Okay, that's tough. And you studied at the American University of Beirut, and then
Yeah.
eventually, what I imagine, you came to the US to do your PhD
Mhm.
and have been teaching in the US, which has, in the past 2 years, as we see the genocidal war against the Palestinians, has become an extraordinary, horrific place, traumatizing place for you because you've been mistreated, horribly mistreated by the academic knowledge industry. And you have been a consistent bright light and a sort of moral clarity for all of us with your writing and with everything you've been saying and doing. But and I can't emphasize this enough, with the sheer amount of translations you have been putting out of poets from Palestine, from Gaza. So thank you so much for everything you've been doing all this time and putting yourself through so much through it.
Well, Bakti, thank you for having me. It's a real honor, and we met in person in a very intense moment, Nakba
Yeah.
Day last year in New
Hmm.
York, and it's a moment I cherish because you created community as you always do, virtual and in person, and I'm very grateful for that. Let me comment. You said many very generous things, but mistreated. I let me comment on that.
Yeah.
I'm well. I'm healthy. I'm at home.
Hmm.
My child is safe. I have a job. I'm furious and angry,
Yeah.
um, but I don't like to think that I've been mistreated because this is a system that's corrupt and has been mistreating us,
Yeah.
people who might identify with my position, both students and professors, since the beginning of these fields in this country. So this is nothing new. It's an intensification, or actually, just a dropping of masks.
Hmm.
Everything we knew. Now we can see it
Absolutely.
clearly, with such transparency that it's unfathomable that
Hmm.
we navigated these systems for me it's been 20 some years.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think what Gaza has offered us, and all Gaza has offered us so much that we don't deserve, is the courage to just not accept this anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very, very interesting what you're saying. And I feel like the timeline, everyone wants to bring us to this originary date of October 7th, as if there was no world before that. And for someone my age, and I think you and I are similar perhaps in that, um, so much of American academia was exposed after 9/11, and that's when I
Mhm.
learned what everything I know now about how ridiculous it can be. And then I was studying at that time with poets and translators and scholars, and I was very lucky to have those people in my life who had come out of like the Vietnam years in the US and had learned that. So it's like, and then I'm sure they had mentors who went before. So it's just non-stop. And there is not even a point of origin. I mean, we have to kind of shatter the illusion of what this knowledge industry is and what it's doing, and the extraordinary utter disregard for actual breathing living human beings
Mhm.
who and just
Yeah.
don't care at all. And this is the part that is so shocking. They will justify anything. But I think, let me pick a starting point, and that starting point is you. And I wanted you to kind of tell our listeners a little bit more about where you grew up and how poetry came into your life. And I've read some nice interviews with you, and you say so many beautiful things about your childhood. Not always beautiful, because I know it was civil war, Lebanon at the time. But just a quick context and its relationship to who you are today.
Yeah, it's actually who I am today, is this backdrop. I was born in Beirut in 1981
Hmm.
to two young, talented parents who thought life was possible. But then immediately, this was, the Civil War began in 1975. This was 1981. The house that they rented that I was brought to from the hospital soon after was burned. The entire building, it was an apartment, due to a car bomb in the street. And then that's the rest of their lives until 1990s, moving from one place to another. They're both originally from South Lebanon. So I spent my childhood in Civil War Beirut on the move all the time. And before we started recording, I was telling you that one of the things I try to protect from my daughter is stability, which I never had as a child.
Hmm.
I remember, living in borrowed houses, relatives' apartments, grandparents' houses for long stretches of time, um, and shelters underground, and but mostly the safest place that I remember fondly is the backseat of my father's car as they were moving. My brother and I have a third brother who was born after the war, but so the memories of early childhood are Ali and I. Ali is a
Hmm.
year and a half younger, in the back seat, and the city burning all the time. You have to figure out which is the safe neighborhood to take the family to. And this was made a safe space, the car, by my father's voice. So he would recite poetry or sing.
Oh,
So this
gosh.
was home for me until I was maybe 9. Just
Hmm.
I can't really pin myself anywhere safe and stable except the car with my parents and his voice.
Hmm.
My father is a poet, and his father was a poet. So family and home are not places as much as they are sounds to me as a child. And the sound of Arabic, especially pre Islamic poetry recited as lullabies, was just magic. I
Yeah.
didn't understand anything, but it was a sound that really gave me comfort and this embrace, and also the sense of it being a superpower. I wanted to be part of that, to know it, to own it. So my earliest memories are these poems that my father and grandfather would recite, and it's what I long for and belong to more than any other house or
Yeah.
town.
Yeah. Wow. That's really beautiful. And what an honor, because when we were in the thick of the COVID pandemic, you and your father had sent us a wonderful video, a reading, a joint reading in Arabic and English, Huda Fakhreddine, right? That's,
Yes, yeah.
yeah. So I'm vaguely projecting a memory into that. I think that's beautiful what you say about the sounds. you know you, so your father was a poet, his father was a poet, and but then what about this notion of studying poetry or doing a
Mhm.
PhD and writing about poetry? Did that I can see how that can bring you closer, but then sometimes I wonder if the academic work distances us sometimes from the practice of.
Yeah.
How do you navigate those two things?
So my father is also a university professor, but I had
Okay.
a lot to
It's a
move
family
away.
business, all of you.
But I broke away slightly, and I studied English literature at the American University of Beirut. So there was
Hmm.
a time when, I'd respond to him with Blake and Eliot and Pound and Wordsworth, and he doesn't read or speak English. So it felt like me, trying to claim a certain space that was my own.
Hmm.
But I can't imagine my life having any purpose if it didn't really go back to the Arabic poetic tradition. And I was always interested in translating and in reading and connecting, placing Arabic literature or launching my view or approach to the study of language and literature from my relationship to Arabic.
Hmm.
So I studied at the American University, and my plan in Beirut, and my plan was never to leave Lebanon. I couldn't imagine life anywhere other than Beirut, really, and it wasn't healthy almost. I just didn't consider or entertain any other plan
Yeah.
until 2005.
Hmm.
And you were saying something about America's amnesia. And America forgets. Vietnam War, 9/11. But whenever an atrocity happens, it's as if we're starting from scratch, reminding this country of its violent history.
Hmm.
For us, at least in Lebanon, it's very difficult to forget war and violence. It's always just yesterday. We always have a sense that we just came out of it. And there was a period of relative stability in the early 2000s
Hmm.
that ended abruptly with the assassination of the prime minister Rafiq Hariri, and then there was a string of assassinations, and the country was hurled again into another crisis.
Yeah.
Uh, so I graduated from AUB in 2004, and my plan was to do anything possible to stay in Lebanon. There wasn't a PhD program at the American university. There was one in the public university, the Lebanese university, where I was at the time teaching as an MA holder. So there's a long story. I won't tell it now. It's very Kafkaesque of trying to apply to the PhD program at the Lebanese university. It involves, going to storage where they store
Oh my gosh.
applications in plastic bags. The application was lost twice. There's a document where I waived for myself the English requirement because I was the professor of the class they needed as a prerequisite for it. It's a long story. It didn't work out at the end. So out of despair in that moment, I applied to the University of Indiana for
Hmm.
a very specific purpose, to work with Suzanne Stetkevich, who was a scholar of Abbasid poetry.
Wow.
And when I was accepted, I was very confused and disoriented. I really didn't know where Indiana was on the map.
Yeah.
I applied to work with this person, and I
Yeah.
didn't really think it through. Living in the American Midwest, I had no idea. And I remember arriving in Indianapolis and stepping into a parking lot and feeling completely horrified. What have I done? What is
Yeah.
this place? And then taking that bus ride from Indianapolis to Bloomington, which is 40 minutes away from the big city, which wasn't really a city. And then
Yeah.
I found myself in this small town, a small college town where I lived 4 years. It was very eye opening. I learned things about myself I didn't even know. But it reconnected me more than I imagined it would to the Arabic language and the need to write in Arabic and think in Arabic every day.
Mm.
My plan initially was to always go back. I always had a return ticket to Beirut
Hmm.
until Ahmed. I met my partner, Ahmed al-Mallah, who was my classmate from Palestine, from Bethlehem, Palestine. And then my life changed because life for a Lebanese and a Palestinian was not possible in Lebanon, which is a very racist country towards Palestinians.
Yeah.
And return to Palestine became my dream.
Yeah.
Also seemed and seems more impossible every day. So we ended up building a life, for better or for worse, in Bloomington, Indiana, and then in Vermont, and then we ended up in Philadelphia. But
Yeah.
both of us
Hmm.
are very unadjusted.
Yeah.
We keep thinking that there should be an end to this
Yeah.
experience. We will go back home, and home. The
Yeah.
idea of home has changed over the years, but we
Right.
still
You're
long.
not home.
We're not. No.
Yeah. Gosh, that stuff. I also find I'm also struck by this idea that you just never ever wanted to leave Lebanon. And I'm thinking of myself like, when will I leave? It's like just wanting to leave, leave. I don't know what it is. And I don't know uh, what the different instincts are. Maybe in your case, it's something to do with the movement, despite the car keeping you safe and despite that being a safe place, I think you want to just belong one place. And
It's because after in that short period of stability, it was the time when I discovered Beirut as the city. I don't
Mhm,
think I really lived in Beirut during my childhood, although that's where I spent it, but it never really connected to it. It was a divided city, it was
mhm,
not safe. I don't remember having a connection with it until that period before I left Lebanon, where I felt finally this city is speaking to me and I have a relationship with it of my own, not one through my parents' experience.
yeah,
And I thought this was all I wanted, really. This city, with all of its problems and contradictions,
yeah,
was where I would have loved to to live my life.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
still dream
You
of
still
going.
might. You might. You
Well,
might.
actually, the moment when I gave up on that dream was August 4th of 2020, the port explosion. And I think
Yeah.
many Lebanese people
Felt that.
mark that moment as another,
Yeah.
end of time. This
Absolutely.
was really when I remember sitting on the couch in here in Philly, and this was the first moment where I felt that I was actually now an immigrant. This
Yeah.
is this is not a visit. There will be no return,
Hmm.
and that was another, yeah, that
Yeah.
devastating
That's
punctuation mark.
absolutely. Um, I know you as a scholar have written, what in the academic world we call monographs. I hate this word because it means like it was just like this solo singular activity, but you've written scholarly books.
Mhm.
But what I know your work through the prolific amounts of translation that you do. Of course, you write a ton of essays and all that, but it's not necessarily clear to me when translation became an activity for you, you know?
So necessarily, as an Arab graduate student in a Middle Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations program, which
Yeah.
is what we call the entities that host Arabic literature, translation is a necessity. There's
Hmm.
no way around it. You find yourself translated. The main activity that takes up most of your time is sitting in a seminar room, dissecting and translating texts,
Yeah.
whether they're 1,500 years old or written yesterday, whether they're a great poem or a tweet. We deal with them exactly the same. We flatten them the exact same way through the filter of inadequate dictionaries, and then the end product is this one thing. It's repetitive, and there's nothing exciting about it.
Yeah.
So translation was a trap because I when I came to Indiana in Bloomington as a graduate student, the effort of having to live in English every day, and I had gone to American schools and universities all my life, so my
Yeah.
English was good. I didn't have a language problem. I just the effort, the mental and emotional effort of having to live in English an entire day was exhausting,
Yeah.
and then along with that came just the schizophrenia or the dilemma of having to refract everything I think about Arabic literature through the lens of English. Just
Hmm.
having to do all that, write the monographs in English was a loss that I still somehow have to justify for myself. And I think the space of agency is translation. It's where English
Hmm.
then submits to the logic of Arabic. At least that's how I approach the translation of poetry.
Hmm. Yeah.
English has to change, has to make space for the structure of Arabic, for the mood, for the connotations and the references. And so I
Hmm.
translation of poetry has always given me this space where I felt I was relatively in control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my translations before fall of 2023 have been in from classical Arabic poetry and contemporary. But
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, there has been this focus on translating Palestinian poetry and especially poetry of or about Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's been amazing. Yeah. Let's kind of start to think about that. And I think before we come to the unfortunate events, sickening events of fall 2023 and onwards, I wanted to ask you because they feel like a culmination of so many different things that you probably experienced before it became what it became. How were you received within the American university system, when you got your job or when you were trying to publish certain topics? How was your work and you as a person navigating the university system in the US before all this? Because I suspect there's a before usually.
Oh, there's a long before. Yes, of course. I mean, one of the things that I've had to explain or justify or comment on over and over is my interest in Arabic poetry in its entirety. I've
Hmm.
been advised or sometimes criticized for claiming that my work encompasses all of Arabic poetry, from pre-Islamic poetry to a poem written yesterday, and the claim that study of poetry cannot submit to a historical imperative. You can't be a specialist in Arabic poetry from 1979 to 1985, and that's it, and have no relationship with the tradition. Time is irrelevant in poetry. Every great poem is urgently present, and to understand a pre-Islamic poem, you have to also be have a relationship with the Arabic language as it exists alive today.
Hmm.
You have to be connected to poetic practice today, and vice versa.
Yeah,
So I think publishing my first book, which was based on my dissertation, required these justifications. What's your specialization?
I know.
Which period are you specialized in? Which is something I completely reject, both in my work and my teaching. And I think there is a new generation of young scholars and academics who work on Arabic poetry who are now more open minded and understand that if Arabic poetry is to have a place in the humanities and not just in the ghetto of area studies, it has to, be whole. We can't keep dividing it into sound bites and fragments and things that serve something else, because that's the biggest challenge since day one of my life in academic institutions in this country, is that we feel we're service departments and units, and
I
that
know.
we are there to teach or provide information for somebody else to do something else with that has nothing to do with a critical or an aesthetic or literary
Hmm.
interest or engagement with Arabic culture.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you see that when, teaching language is, the most transparent contact point. Who comes to these classes and what do they plan to do with this knowledge? Of course,
Hmm.
there are always brilliant students who are
Sure.
talented and have genuine interests, but you also are faced with the other side of this, what we serve and how we're being used in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the post 9/11 surge in all the Arabic language programs for all the spies and all
Yeah,
the people who were going to go and, get
in 2005, when
invade
I
Iraq.
came
And
to this
yeah,
country, in 2005, you would hear it said out loud in rooms that as long as the war on terror continues, our enrollments will be good.
oh my gosh.
And to hear that in passing,
Yeah.
and to be from there and to think about the repercussions and the consequences on our lives,
Mhm.
generations, not just my life, and to have it rephrased like that and come up in a meeting thinking about enrollments and tuition and
Yeah. Ugh, it's vulgar. Um, you know, I think you now have been given the title of activist, outspoken activist, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Of course, I mean, I'm happy for whatever you might consider you're doing, that's activism. But of course, there are negative connotations to that, and turned out to have a lot of issues,
mm,
that came out of that. But when you were in the years before the last 2 years, before things heated up, were you kind of activisming? Were you doing things that were making you, a bit of a problem? Were there things like that, or did stuff really start happening after?
no, activisming is the verb you used. I think I have found myself in positions where I was perceived as being
Sure.
activist or agitating, but that was never really, no. No, I don't mind agitating in a system like this, but the context for that before these past 2 years was just insistence on reading Arabic poetry with integrity, and
Yeah,
not accepting the compromising of what I do.
absolutely.
And there has been friction after that, both on a small scale in my department
Yeah.
with colleagues who are very close, but also on a larger scale at the university and in the field. I
Hmm.
remember like actions or events that that didn't lead to backlash like the one we've experienced in the past 2 years at all, but something to a lesser scale is when Trump instituted his Muslim ban. We
Yeah.
responded here on campus with an event called Poetry Unbanned, and it attracted many people on campus, students and colleagues and staff, who just felt that this was a way to make a statement,
Hmm.
to say something when they were lost for words. This was early Trump days. We had no idea how much worse it would get.
Yeah.
But I've also been involved in Palestine events from the beginning of my experience in American universities as a student and then later as a professor,
Hmm.
hosting talks. And there's
Yeah.
always a war on Gaza. Remember, even before the genocide,
Yeah.
there.
I mean, I'm thinking of Stephen Saleta, who became the outstanding kind of, he was, it was really a witch trial and they really dragged him through everything. So, yeah, I mean, it's always been a thing. So in your case, before October 7th and all the things that happened after, there was a festival that you were part of that then suddenly went on to have, be vilified and be talked of as if, I don't know, as if it was some sort of a violent event or something. But what was this festival?
This festival was a collaboration with the organization that's called Palestine Writes.
Hmm.
And they had organized an earlier festival in 2020 that moved online because of COVID. So there was one version or edition of it before, but it wasn't in person. This was the first in person festival, and it's a huge event. It required a lot of planning, a year and a half at least of planning. I was only the connection between them and the University of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
I
Hmm.
don't claim a bigger role. I participated in some events. One of them was a poetry reading that we called The World as Palestine with Olivia Elias and Ahmed Al Mallah.
Very
And the
good.
other involvement was a conversation with the poet and novelist Ibrahim Nasrallah.
Ah,
But
okay.
the celebration was the fact that this was a huge event, over 120 guests, 1,500 attendees, I think, or even more. So a huge event that took up space and time on campus. I was the connection with the university to because we hosted it here.
Hmm.
Of course, the team of volunteers and organizers did a lot of work for months in advance. But the breaking point, so people remember October 2023 as when the world
Changed.
ended or changed. To me, the world changed. My life at this university became much more transparent and changed on August 15, 2023. That was the day I received an email from the administration telling me that this festival is now on their radar. They're worried about it because they received a letter from the ADL and the Jewish Federation of the larger Philadelphia area telling
Classic.
them that they should shut down this anti Semitic fest.
Hmm.
And the administration, as you I'm sure know very well, has this very vacuous, slimy way of addressing this. The language they use in email or in person is absolutely empty. It performs hypocrisy brilliantly. They just talk and talk and say nothing. And they frame it as support or worry for you, but it's really just a brilliant way of canceling you entirely and intimidating you.
Hmm.
And this was their first interaction with me. Lawyers were involved, and then it started getting out of hand. Hate,
Wow.
threats, and then the closer we got to the event itself, yeah, the festival was September 2023,
Right.
22nd to the 24th. It was just full on, felt like a war, a battlefield.
Hmm.
Security, and then just the social media attacks, and then the security concern. Everybody was worried for their safety. And of course, the University of Pennsylvania, as all universities do, they feed into the lies and the delusions. And while a festival that celebrated poetry, music, cuisine, the arts, children's literature was happening, they offered Jewish students security and escorts as they walked across campus because they wanted to affirm this idea that Palestinian culture equals a threat to Jewish safety. That
Hmm.
in itself is anti Semitic. This is where we lost the teaching moment, and this is where we wronged our Jewish students by not using this moment to teach. that this is a lie, and just a product of the brainwashing Zionist machine.
Hmm.
To do that to a Jewish student is abuse and is failing to teach and actually allowing them to believe the lies that co opt their own culture and identity and prey on their
Yeah,
trauma and their fears.
absolutely. But I don't, UPenn, it's an Ivy League, well funded, big university. Clearly, this festival had been planned, I would imagine, 1.5, 2 years in advance. There were higher ups who have to sign out to do that, to book the classrooms, the this and the that. Why did it fall on you?
You'd be surprised, Bhakti, how little they pay attention to what we do. I was very proud of my involvement in the
Yeah.
festival and was sharing information about it with my department the year before. This is an opportunity. We have a language program, an Arabic language program. How amazing would it be for students to attend? This is almost called immersion for
Hmm.
3 days, where you could meet writers and artists and listen to things in Arabic and experience the culture. I don't think anybody opened my emails or took them seriously or paid attention to them. And I'm used to this, to being ignored. Our work, as valuable as we think it is, and it is always, relegated to this corner of the institution that nobody really
Yeah.
cares about or pays attention to until it becomes a threat or a problem
Sure.
the lawyers have to interfere in.
Hmm.
I really think it caught them by surprise. They didn't realize the scale of the event until they got that letter from the ADL.
Yeah. The ADL, my
And
gosh, they're just awful. And then I want to know, and this is my own personal interest, of course, in literature departments. My PhD was in comparative literature, and I have taught in English literature departments forever and ever, partially to avoid teaching language and things like that. And it's a harm I've done to myself to end up in the monocultural English departments too. But I was in comparative literature department right after 9/11 happened. Like it happened like the first day of my grad school was 9/11. It was in New York, and then it became that. And everybody was unmasked, and you knew what their views were. And the main thing was literature is not politics, but
mhm,
literature is the battlefield, literature is the politics is literature, whatever you want to say, right? And you learn that lesson very fast, because everyone is constantly telling you, but you teach literature, but it's poetry, but this, but that, trying to constantly divest you, while they are playing the most political game as the
yes, of course.
institution. So how did your department react? Because the other thought I'm having about all this is just the level of the carcerality, like reporting, she said this and her email said that. You said your emails were probably ignored for days on end until things heated up for them and they got pressure from ADL and so on. And then, of course, somebody would have probably spoken to your department and checked in about you. I'm just wondering, this structure, this canopy that we call the literature department, how were they were going to host, they were going to get credit for like a major Palestinian literary festival, but instead, how did they react? What did people
Well,
do?
my department wasn't really involved as a
Hmm.
department. We don't
Sure.
have funding to support things like that. But yes, it would
Sure.
have gotten credit, or it should have jumped on the opportunity of this cultural event that
Yeah.
really falls exactly within its mandate and its mission.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm sad to say that the department distanced itself. It tried to feign support initially, but then there was a moment when my chair wouldn't meet with me
Hmm.
because they were afraid of being sued. I mean, fear is a very powerful thing, and
Hmm.
it's real. I mean, I was afraid at some point for my safety, but I think what's not permissible is hypocrisy. You can be afraid, but don't be a hypocrite. And
Yeah.
what this experience with the festival at the University of Pennsylvania exposed to me is just the hypocrisy of some of the closest colleagues.
Yeah.
The fact that they, are scholars of Middle Eastern studies. They've spent lifetimes mining this culture,
Mhm.
profiting from it, building careers and reputations. And before the genocide, we're talking about before the genocide,
Mhm.
when a cultural event, a purely cultural event, and culture is also politics. I mean, it would be ridiculous to speak
I
about
know.
anything Palestinian without mentioning the occupation, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocide.
Mhm.
It would be a shirking of responsibility, not just as an academic, but as a human being. And some of my colleagues who disappeared or were terrified to the point of hypocrisy and complicity are historians of the Middle East, which
Yeah.
is which is too unfortunate. It's painful actually, but again, not shocking because as we were saying, these are things we know
Yeah. Yeah.
about the system that we have existed in and have navigated. But you
Yeah.
know, the unbearable thing is that I'm used to navigating it masked. When the
Mhm.
mask dropped, it was just, it felt like I was fighting for my existence. And there
Mhm.
was no way to back down or to compromise because accepting any of this would have been complete betrayal of everything I held dear. Uh,
Yeah.
so for a while there was no one around until a few colleagues from the English department and other departments, not mine, wrote a petition and signed it and garnered support in defense of the festival. This was
Mhm.
before October, and so there was a counter movement to uh, the security militarization of
Yeah.
with which the university responded to the festival. And the
Wow.
festival happened, it was a
Yeah.
success. Of course, there were counterterrorism units on the two corners of the street, outside the hall, where the average age of, the people gathered inside were either under 10 or the average of 75. Uh, Scholars and thinkers and artists and many, many, many students in the audience,
Mhm.
including students from all across the Philadelphia area. And this was a service to institutions not beyond Penn itself.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so it
So,
happened and it was a great success.
yeah. And then was there an absolute, absolute shift? I mean, by which I mean that the festival happens, there is some support garnered. Come on, let's have a nice literary festival. Let's oppose this kind of stuff. And then all this October business begins, and suddenly there is a switch. I mean, there must have been a feeling during the festival that despite all this opposition, people are working to make it happen. People are coming, people are watching, guests are still flying in, all that stuff, and it works. And then after that, suddenly these events rock the world, and American academia, all the rot kind of explodes.
Yeah.
And was there a complete turn? Was there suddenly silence? Like people looked at you differently? Like what happened?
There wasn't really a celebration post the festival. There was just a receding of the
Really?
hate and the horror
Hmm.
and the attacks. And we barely took a breath. And then
Right.
October 7th happened, and the university, in the most
Mhm.
despicable of ways, made a statement, as they all did. And in
Yeah.
the same breath, the event, the Palestine Writes Literary Festival and the events of October 7th were put together in the same
My God.
breath as the crisis that now the administration had to deal with. And this is a level of ignorance and maliciousness that, still
Hmm.
astounds me when I remember seeing that first statement that Liz McGill, who later stepped down after the congressional,
Yeah.
her testimony at Congress, made. And these are people who know nothing about the region. They know nothing about the history. They know nothing about the culture. They're fed words by lawyers who also know nothing. And they just allowed themselves to be pawns of corrupt power. And then, of course,
Mhm.
the donors and the funders started showing up.
Yeah.
And
It was not until Trump came into power and appointed that woman Stefanik into his office, that I actually found out that she's not even a Jewish American woman, like marinated
She's an
into.
anti-Semite on record. We know that
She's
she is
like,
an anti-Semite on
no,
record.
I had no. I was like, what? This is. It's just unbelievable. Like the intersection of the white supremacy with all of this, with all this Zionist ideology and how they all kind of work together. I was
But you'd
so
think,
shocked.
exactly, and you'd think this is the moment that where the academic, the intelligent person in the room, supposedly, this is their moment to shine. This is their moment to say, to make the little speech that ends the movie, or whatever delusion they have in their minds. But this was Liz McGill's opportunity, facing Stefanik, who told her, what did you do when there was a call for Jewish genocide on your campus? A complete vile lie. And we know the videos were doctored and the captions were
Yeah,
mismatched with the calling. We caught you in genocide was then doctored to say we call for Jewish genocide. And Liz McGill, like a deer in the headlights, failed miserably, miserably.
absolutely. They
She
all
could
did.
have called her out, called Stefanik out. She could have gone out, whether I think her fate was already decided. She was probably
Exactly.
going to resign anyway, but go out with some dignity.
Yeah,
Show that you have an ounce of intelligence. But
I
no,
know. I know. No, not even denial. Like just like no, that's not true. No, nothing. Just like oh, it's preposterous. And you were mentioned in those hearings, and connectedly, so many things probably going on at the time, and probably the level of death threats and menace that you were experiencing must have been extraordinary. And then you filed this lawsuit. Can you say a little bit about this lawsuit?
so in January of 2023, after the congressional hearings, the
24.
University
Mhm.
24, yeah, in January of 2024, right? The
Yes.
University of Pennsylvania received a letter from the congressional committee that called itself the Committee on Education and the Workforce. And the letter asked the University of Pennsylvania to hand over records and emails and all it can to aid in the investigation in anti Semitism, the McCarthy esque witch hunt. This was not a subpoena. It was not legally binding at all. It was just an intimidation move. And the University of Pennsylvania willingly cooperated, obeyed way in advance. And they announced that they are going to voluntarily cooperate with the investigation. The letter gave them a deadline of February 7th, I remember. And it seemed like it was serious, but it was nothing. It was just a power move.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the university obliged and announced that it put legal holds on many of our emails, meaning our emails are not private. Somebody is sifting through them and searching for keywords. They sent us a list of keywords like
Wow.
Palestine, anti Semitism. It's a ridiculous list, which is, of course, it's a violation of my privacy, but that's okay. It's a violation of everybody who's emailing
Mhm.
me privacy, including my students. So I've stopped using my pen email since then, which of course is a hassle and inconvenience, but
Yeah.
nothing to complain about. So we filed a lawsuit in March of that year to stop the University of Pennsylvania from sharing our information with Congress because we claim and insist that this is damaging. It has caused harm and will cause more harm.
Absolutely.
Harm, I mean, it's a long, endless list of
And
things.
there's a long history of how it does cause harm. We've already seen it happen. It's just a repetition. Absolutely.
And the what this allows, aside from personal sense of security, threats at home and in the office, and the inconvenience of having to teach in unmarked rooms, the fear the students have when they are around me or in my class. I mean, we do have some scares sometimes. When I'm walking down a hall alone, I catch myself uh, having a panic attack sometimes. This is a country where everybody's armed, and
Yep.
it's so aside from all that, what this allows is a complete flattening and co-optation of the work we do.
Hmm.
And there has been even an interference here at this university in Arabic language classes. what they
Wow.
can and can't do. An advice that went out to all Hillel students to not do their homework, which suggested that they attend Palestine Writes or some panels. There was interference in curriculum,
Hmm.
curricular issues, and this is a door once opened that it means the end of our work
Absolutely.
entirely, complete co-optation and dilution of everything we do.
Hmm. Did you find, I know that the suit was dismissed almost a year later or something like that, but did you find that it did, that putting it out there, putting it out into the world, I know it was written about, um, do you think the institution shook a bit, or they just kind of doubled down, or how do you find universities reacting to something like that? It, whatever the outcome, does it does it do something, does it move something?
The institution reacted to this with double standards, as it reacts to everything. I
Hmm.
mean, when we filed the lawsuit, we didn't have much expectations. We knew that this was
Yeah.
the goal in itself, is just to make a statement, to
Hmm.
not be silent, and to use the lawsuit to say things around it in the media, on social media, in the school paper. There was no hope that we're going to win anything because,
Sure.
and we're working with some great lawyers, and I would like to mention Jonathan Wallace, who's a movement lawyer, as he likes to call himself. He does this pro bono. He's committed to the cause. He's a man with great integrity, and he will not go away. And I learned that from him.
Yeah.
The win here is that you're not silenced. You make
Exactly.
use of every platform to make the statement. And the statement, our statement, was Gaza. Yes, I am being attacked. Yes, my colleagues are mean. Yes, life on campus is inconvenient, but that's a distraction. I am being made a distraction, and I am distracted. Preying on my safety and the safety of my family is a way of silencing what I say, which is nothing really. I mean, my words are not going to change history, but I remind myself and everybody around me and my students that this is the moment where Gaza is being annihilated on your watch. So you would be a ridiculous being to show up to class and do your homework as if this is not happening in the background.
Hmm.
Everything has to launch from Gaza, whether it's in literature, in politics, in climate studies, in gender studies, in anything.
Yeah.
It, it, we are witnessing it and literally witnessing it like nothing has ever been witnessed in
Yeah.
history before. It's
Absolutely.
it's on our pillows, in our car. All the screens are massacres and bloodshed.
I know.
So it's not an exaggeration to say that this should be the lens through which we see the world. And the lawsuit allowed us to do that. It was
Hmm.
dismissed months later by, I'm going to try to measure my words, and the judge was misinformed, to say the least. He dismissed it with prejudice because he claimed that the harm I was claiming was speculative. It didn't happen yet. So,
What?
in other words, I wasn't shot yet, or something to that effect.
Hmm.
It was a ridiculous and cowardly. I mean, a judge should
Of
be
course.
just and brave. And I think this judge decided to do nothing. He dismissed our lawsuit with prejudice, meaning we can't file again in that same court, and there are other avenues we are still considering.
Hmm.
So we just make the statement that we're not silenced and we're not going away. The
Yeah.
same judge also dismissed the other lawsuit coming from claiming that Penn has not dealt well with its anti Semitism. He dismissed that, saying that no, Penn has done everything it can to deal with anti Semitism on campus.
Gosh. Yeah, it's just it just keeps rolling this way. It's so gross. um no, but I think also, of course, you have to speak out, and you do it, and you just have to do it. It almost, the outcome almost doesn't matter. But for me also, what is important is that you set a precedent, and that you become, like, you become the backup on which somebody else will climb, later, you know whenever that later is. Right now it's hard to imagine
Yeah.
what's coming, but you become that, bridge, you become that stepping stone for somebody who needs to articulate a thought like that, or, you know think about what's happening to them, because
Exactly.
we are not even close to resolving this particular issue. I want to ask you about, come back to the your essay that was in LitHub, and it was called Intifada, on being an Arabic literature professor in a time of genocide. And where you chronicled like these staff meetings and things like that, faculty meetings. And you were told, and this is just maybe an obsession of mine, you were told, but why don't you just teach some medieval poetry, because that that
Mhm.
should be okay. uh, can you talk a little bit about what this was, or how this department was kind of wanting you to alter entirely what is literature itself, what is poetry itself?
Yeah, it launches from what you mentioned earlier, this
Mhm.
uh, cowardly uh, delusion or lie that that literature doesn't have to be political,
Mhm.
and that, look out for yourself, be smart, think about your interests in your career, and just lay low for a bit. And this was the advice this colleague, who was genuinely distressed. I'm not,
Sure.
undermining their feelings, but I, for a while, became responsible for everybody's feelings. Everybody would come up to me and, in tears, tell me how sorry they were about what I was going through, and if was anything they could do. There were many things they could do, but they were not willing. They only wanted to unburden themselves. But
Mhm.
this colleague in particular asked for a meeting. It was a ridiculous gathering of 4 or 5 people in a room. Unfortunately, it had a glass wall, so we were displayed, a spectacle for everybody in the hall to see. And that colleague's advice was, "Oh, but you do medieval poetry so well. Why don't you focus on that?" And of course, all the blood rushed to my face. I easily blush, turn red, very
Yeah.
red, and I wanted to say so many things, not about the moment we were in and about Gaza and Palestine and genocide, but about the study of literature in this country, and how could it felt like an attack on medieval Arabic poetry that
Yeah.
I first wanted to defend before I got to the moment of extreme racism that was being displayed in that room. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that was the advice I was getting from well-meaning colleagues, is that
Mhm.
you don't have to be you don't have to expose yourself. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself in a time of endless massacres. It takes other forms other than receding into cowardice, I
I
think.
know.
So my response to this, after the publishing of the articles, so this happened in the fall. In the spring, I offered a new class that was called Resistance Literature from Pre-Islamic Arabia to Palestine, which is again insisting on the wholesomeness, the whole studying Arabic poetic tradition as a whole, not chopping it up for convenience or for safety, and to show that Palestine belonged to a long, long tradition of
Yes.
resistance and defiance in language and in metaphor and in practice and in daily life decisions.
Yeah.
And this was the class that ended up being this was the class that was mentioned in the congressional hearing. I taught it that spring, but somebody had given the poster, the flyer, to the congressmen in December, and they were waving it and claiming that I was spreading hate because Ghassan Kanafani was on the syllabus.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
point of the class was that to say that Palestine belongs to a long, long tradition of defiance and resistance, and this is how we should be studying literature in this moment, if not always. And I
Mhm.
have that colleague to thank, that colleague who told me to focus on medieval poetry. There was a lot of medieval poetry in that class through the frame of Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah. There are so many industries that I am angry at. I'm angry at academia and the industry of university industry. I'm angry at publishing, and what they're publishing, what they're not. The media, I mean, it's just absolutely disgustingly out of control. I mean, I just And then, of course, I'm just angry at every other business that doesn't think about the material structures, that support Israel and so on and so forth. Do you locate? I think at the end of it all, for me, the media and then like academia are the two that I tend to just completely blame, extraordinarily blame. So the
Yeah.
world of education, which I know, and the world of media, which I know, is like the kind of focus of my fury.
I identify with your fury. I think fury is right. I have to say, this structure I find myself in,
Yeah,
what we call higher education in the United States, for sure. But again, I keep saying it's not surprising. I'm not shocked. I'm dismayed. I'm horrified, but it's not shocking. And I mean, 620, how many days of
yeah,
genocide? I mean, we are beyond the breaking point. I mean, nothing we say really
absolutely.
matters anymore. When you think about, when you wake up and see images from Gaza, and I now in my mind are two images that I will never unsee. Every day I come across an image that I will never unsee.
I know.
The young man stretched out on
Yeah,
the dead and emaciated, and yeah, it is. I mean, this is today. Yesterday was another image, and they all pile up. And unfortunately, genocide has happened. It's
hmm,
done. There's no. We failed. We failed miserably, and the institutions have revealed their true faces. In all institutions and structures of governance, of diplomacy, of education, uh, commerce, everything. All Gaza offered us this. It shows us to be the hypocrites that we really are as a
hmm.
human race. I mean, we failed. That's it. Khalas, as we say in Arabic. So I
Yeah,
I'm angry. I don't know what to do with that. There was a time when I translated, not because I thought, I was serving anything, but I needed it. I didn't know how to do anything else. But even that, in a recent interview, somebody asked me about translation, and it feels like a futile thing to be doing, especially translating into English. What's the point? When you translate, you need to believe there's a reader on the other side,
hmm,
invested, at least partially as invested as you are in the text. But it feels like we're speaking to a void, because this language now is also part of a system that is complicit in genocide. In its media, the way language is distorted and abused in the media is
no,
disgusting.
it's beyond.
I don't know if
Yeah,
it's worth. I don't want. Despair is not a possibility either for us here who are safe and
I know.
not dead yet. I mean, that's not an option.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered your question.
No, no, no. I was just it. There's no answer. I just wondered if there was one particular sort of focus of your rage, but it's everything. It's everywhere, and despair is not an option. But despair is constant, as are as is guilt and rage and shock and sadness and all those
Yeah,
things. But this thing that you're saying, I don't know what to do. I mean, it's like part of the reason I'm talking to you is because you are doing and you're holding us all, and I think that's so important. You said Gaza is no longer just a place. Gaza is a locus, an ethos. It is a signpost in place that has also become a source point of time. And as readers of Arabic poetry know well, a place can have agency. It can become all of time, past, present, and future. And then you go on, and there's a lot you're saying, and I will, of course, include that quote when I um, write a little bit about the podcast. But do you want to say what do you mean by that?
I think I've already mentioned it before. This idea that everything we do now has to launch from Gaza.
Yeah.
And this idea of it not becoming more than just a place, but a signpost in time, or even the source of time. History now launches from Gaza. This is where it ends, and this is where it begins, if it is to begin again. Is just a phrasing or a channeling of what places do in Arabic poetry. The Arabic
Mhm.
Qasida always begins with a standing upon ruins and the naming of places where loved ones used to be and no longer are, where
Mhm.
we used to be and we no longer recognize ourselves. It's the way the Qasida, the Arabic poem, defeats time and history by
Mhm.
locating, grounding itself in this place that becomes the source point of all of time. And this is how the poet finds voice and then launches into the qasida when they are initially faced with silence, with the inability to say anything. And Gaza now is this ruin, this poetic ruin that will, if there's a future, it has to find roots there. If there's a relationship with the past, it has to begin by standing upon Gaza.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something I believe sincerely. I feel very guilty doing, and again, I don't. I mean, this is a privilege again to feel guilt and contend with it here,
Sure.
an ocean away, in this air conditioned room. But I think there's no value to anything I do, and in the very petty small world of what I do as a writer and a translator and an educator, as an instructor in the classroom,
Mhm.
I cannot justify for myself teaching anything from now on if it doesn't start from the fact that you, students, all of you, and I, are witnessing a genocide, have witnessed a genocide. We're helpless to do anything to stop it. And this is it. This is our burden. But if we are to learn anything, it has it has to launch from that. There's no other option for me.
Yeah. I want to ask you one final question. What does it feel like to be a problem?
It feels like a responsibility. At this moment, at this point, being a problem feels like a responsibility I have to own up to.
Mhm.
It's good to be a problem in the classroom. This is how learning happens. And I really hope, I'm always hoping that students who think of me as a security threat or think of me as hate spreading take my classes. I would love it because they are a problem to me, I'm a problem to them, and that's how we learn. I mean, the classroom has been a saving space this past semester at least, and I have had to interact day in day out with students who come to my classes with preconceived ideas, with convictions, with points they want to make,
Mhm.
and it's not always a success. It's often agonizing. But there have been breakthroughs. I think being a problem, and we're placing problem in quotation marks, not making it easy for the system, not making it easy for my colleagues when they just want the faculty meeting to end as soon as possible, when they want the procedure bureaucratic thing to just be smooth. Nothing should be smooth.
Mhm. I love it.
Maybe it's, yeah, I'm going to be a pain, it's fine. I'm paying the price, I'm the first to pay the price of this, but
Sure.
it's the least we could do. If every moment can become a return, refocusing on Gaza, because we are so easily distracted, and just a resisting of this distraction, then I'm glad to be that problem, and I hope to make it a teaching and learning moment. I'm learning too all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the least we could say is that there's a problem in any room in the world today. There's a problem.
Yeah. It
If
beats silence for sure.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Huda. That was
Thank you.
amazing. I
Thank
learned a lot. You taught and I learned. Maybe you
thank
learned.
you
I
for
don't
the
know.
opportunity. Yes, that's very
Thank
generous. Thank you.